Stay tuned. We have a great interview coming right up. Hello, welcome to Main Street. I am your host, Jacqueline Timmer. It's a pleasure to be here with you. This is our first episode on USLA and TECN TV. I have my coffee. Most of you are probably on the East Coast eating a burrito or a lunch, but I am on the West Coast, best coast, so I've got my Joe. So as we dive in today, we're going to be covering socialism, which is a huge hot topic right now in the United States. We have no teleprompters or scripts, just notes, and I'm going to be sharing some of my thoughts as well as bringing on Jonathan Uzcategui, who is an immigrant from Venezuela, small business owner, and is now involved in his local government in Wilmington, North Carolina. So diving in today, let's start with a couple news segments. Just some information that I want to highlight in the news that is concerning to me and want to be able to share with you. So 4 areas, I'm just going to rattle them off and we'll dive right in. The first is the Equality Act. The second is HR 1 or House Resolution 1. The third is the big tech oligarchs and their fact checking. And the fourth is the 34 executive orders from current President Joe Biden. So we'll dive into those, but just to preface with a short story of why this is important to me, and I hope it's important to you. I was getting my nails done the other day out in La Jolla, beautiful place, great place to get your nails done. And I was speaking with the nail tech, lovely lady. I see her every month. My nails last a month. It's pretty great. But so I was speaking with her. She's an immigrant from Russia, and we were just talking about the current news and events, and it was actually so refreshing to be able to talk with someone about politics and just have a real conversation and to not have it be a place of offense or agitation or feel like you're walking on eggshells because, you know, you're talking about politics, about the issues right now. And so we were having a discussion, and as we spoke, I was sharing with her some of the things that my team and I had come across when we were traveling in Philadelphia, DC, Michigan, etc. during the elections, what we were discovering in the election process, etc. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, that's just like Russia." And so with that, it became suddenly aware to me that she was following mainstream media. She was concerned about the political climate, but what I was sharing with her was a completely different narrative than what she had been exposed to. And while many of us know that mainstream media is on its own agenda, it's pretty easy to get caught up or lost in how much its agenda controls the narrative and how much people don't know about what's going on. So before I have to rattle off to the next segment, I want to hit these 4 topics really quickly. First, the Equality Act is anti-First Amendment. So while I personally do have friends with different orientations and different views of sexuality than my own, First Amendment is absolutely key to keeping the United States and protecting freedom of religion and freedom of religious expression and freedom of speech is essential, not just to Christians like myself, but it's essential to Jews, to Muslims, to whoever whatever you believe within the United States. Being able to have those rights protected is going to be essential. And a lot of the time we think, well, if they're not targeting us, it's not a problem. But if they target the right, who's to stop them from coming for us or you in the future? So that's the Equality Act. House Resolution 1, this has to do with election integrity issues. It's a big no-no. It removes federalism. It destroys federalism. And we'll talk more about federalism in future episodes, but essentially the Federalist structure, not federal government, but the Federalist structure that has checks and balances between the states and between the branches of government is what protects our liberties. And HR Resolution or House Resolution 1 attacks that full on. Big tech fact checkers are not grounded in truth or verified information, go check out Steven Crowder's latest video, and he talks about verified information that was put out on Twitter and how it was ripped off even though it was factually verified. That's their fact-checking is a political agenda. And then last, because I have to do this super, super fast because we're on a time crunch, Joe Biden, I gotta do it. Joe Biden, 34 executive orders already. The executive branch of government is not supposed to have that much power. This is not how we're structured. It's not how it works. Okay, we're cutting to an interview. Let's go. Oh, 3, 2, 1, we're cutting. Hello, welcome back. I am not welcome back. This is actually our first episode where we are live. We've done the podcast before, but now we are live, and I'm so excited. Today we have Jonathan Uzcategui. Did I get the last name right this time? Awesome. Jonathan, it's so great to have you back. We had him on the earlier podcast, and I thought we have to kick off our first episode on USLA and TCN TV with Jonathan. Jonathan immigrated from Venezuela, is a small business owner, and is heavily involved in his local community. So it's such an honor to have you on today. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Last time, we spoke about your experience in Venezuela, your love for the States. I'd love to dive back in a little bit and go back to what it was like growing up in Venezuela under Chavez and just the experience that was and the experience of immigrating to the United States and what that looked like for you.
Well, growing up in Venezuela was, it's a great country, with a lot of opportunities. It was I'm not saying a peaceful country, but it was okay. It was not that bad. When I came here, it was on the middle of the revolution when Chavez was pretty much trying to take force, the country by force. And, in the middle of that, I decided to start coming back, coming to the United States, and then I would go back and forth until finally I decided not to go back because things got really bad, but it was good. It was good. Growing up in Venezuela, I had a good childhood. I went to military school pretty much on my childhood. My father was a small business owner in Southern Venezuela. We used to...
What was your father's business?
He had a grocery store at one point. He had a furniture factory, and then he had a restaurant. So he also had some bosses, transportation bosses. So he was always moving from one business to another. Just pretty much what I've been doing here, moving from one business to another. I guess I got it from then. But the last business he had was a furniture factory. That's the last business he has.
And how was that growing up with your father being a small business owner? I know for me, my dad was in politics, so I had the perk of running around the Capitol like, a crazy person when nobody else got to do that. So what were the perks? What were the cons of that lifestyle, and how did that look for you and your family?
Well, I tell you something, I didn't like it in the beginning. You have to get up early in the crack of dawn all the time with my dad. For some reason, he always wanted to get up in the crack of dawn, and I hated that. So, he'll drag me, days that I wanted to stay and sleep in, especially in the summer. We had to pretty much go to work with him, and, I forgot also he had an ice cream distributor. I think that was the best business he had.
I was going to say, that sounds like a good one. I'd be all right with that.
That was the only one that I really liked the most because I was eating a lot of ice cream in the moment. He used to take us to the factory where they make the ice cream, and it was always good to go around. I was friends with the owner's son, so it was nice whenever we went over there, we went toward the factory, and we get to actually eat the ice cream right straight from the machine as they were making the ice cream. So that was the only business that I was okay with. The rest, it was probably not, because it was a lot of things to do. The grocery store was a lot of things to do. So,
Jonathan,
I think the ice cream.
That's great. with that, so it sounds like your father instilled a work ethic in you and a work ethic in your siblings. What, with the small business dynamic and that element, it's something that you're super passionate about here in the States. When did you start to see those changes and shifts in Venezuela as it started moving more towards a socialist and communist regime?
I think, before Chavez, Venezuela went to what we're going right now in the United States. It's so-called revolution. That's what you're seeing right now here in Venezuela. And that before Chavez, we started having a lot of, politics start pushing these ideologies where the rich man is getting richer, the poor, communities are getting ripped up by the wealthy, all these Marxist ideologies. They started kind of, pushing into the community. So it was a little bit of a, in the time, I didn't understand a lot of these things. I call them in a bubble. I was living in a bubble. I really didn't pay attention to a lot of the things. It took me when I moved here to understand a lot of things, what was going on over there. I noticed a lot of things like the university in Venezuela is well infiltrated by communists. Well, I never understood that well until I moved here. And I started, putting everything together. It's like, oh my God, it's bad. It got really, really bad, So that's something that I remember. That before Chavez, they were already building up, that platform and the ideologies for what it came later on when Chavez got in power. So that's pretty much what I see here.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of jump into that ideology focus for a moment because I was reading this morning some excerpts from Whittaker Chambers. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but for you or for our viewers, he was a part of espionage in the United States for the Russian government during the Soviet Union. And so, he left that, and it's about him walking away from that and that process of him processing communism. And he goes into, I have quotes upon quotes here. It was a really fascinating read. But essentially what he's talking about is the ideology behind communism. And what I started realizing as I was reading this morning is we're looking at how that affects churches. You brought up education, how that's in the schools, how it affects small business, because in socialism, the government owns the means of production. And then now how that's influencing big tech. So, in that experience, in that cultural transition, you mentioned education, but what were some of the institutions or shifts that you noticed that were promoting or propelling a particular ideology, and what did that look like?
Well, like I said, the universities in Venezuela, they had a big part of on that transition, how the revolution was pushed into the Venezuela. It was the university, but once again, in the moment, with my age, I really didn't comprehend what was going on. It took me to be here and get a little bit more mature to finally put together what they were trying to do. Like the communist organizations will infiltrate Venezuelan university. So anytime, let's see, gas prices will go up. So by going up, things will go up, prices on transportation will go up, and many things. And the universities will come and start rising up on the street, burning tires, burning
and how old were
buses. 18 years, probably 18, 17,
Yeah.
18 years old. So it started to becoming, the country started going to really, a strong shift. The peace that I remember when I was probably in my 10, it was no longer there. It was just a transition to something. In the moment, like I said, you don't pay attention to it, and I think it's an issue that I see right now here too. A lot of kids don't understand what's going on. And by the time you realize, it probably be too late.
I want to dive into that further, but actually, quick production thing. David, my timer disappeared, so can you kind of keep track of our time and signal me here in a bit? Thanks. You hit it on the head. You hit the nail on the head. I'm a millennial. I've got Gen Z trailing up right behind me here, and and there's so much confusion. And I believe, this isn't an exact stat, I'm going to summarize it, but I believe it's 1 in 3 millennials now. So, over 33.3% view communism favorably in the United States. That was absolutely shocking to me. And then, of course, we have Gen Z coming up behind. So how do we engage with this discussion? Because what I'm starting to notice in my personal conversations, or even just as I'm grappling with these ideas in personal life, it seems like there is this agitation that takes place, of course, like the uprising, if you study Marxism and how it creates that division in the classes, but this frustration or agitation that takes place, and then there's this redirecting of compassion or compassionate action in order to help the little guy. And it seems to me, and I want your thoughts on this, that communism or socialism is really built around this kind of pseudo-democratic idea, when really it's a power grab. And so how do we approach that with the younger generation, the youth who are experiencing this, and really they're just expressing frustration, but they don't understand that they're being used by a larger agenda to create a power grab within the United States?
Well, I believe that the best way to approach this with education, and we have I think a little of a problem here, because they are not actually teaching what I believe things that kids should learn in the school. The first thing we need to teach kids in school is how to love this nation. That's the number one thing. How this nation is the greatest country in the world, how this nation is the most gifted in the world, how this nation has done the things that it put us to defeat fascists and slavery. That's the first thing. We need to teach people how to love this country. The second thing is to teach a little bit more history. What's happening all over the world with these ideologies like socialism. And they always end in authoritarian communism. That's just a step for what they really want, like you say, a power grip. So first is to teach how to love this nation so we can teach kids how to protect something. Because if we don't teach that part, then you're not going to get them ready to actually understand the next thing. I think that's the first thing. We need to teach how to love this great nation, and then we can start teaching them how bad these ideologies are. Because they always, put themselves like, we're trying to do it to bring equality and we really care about it, but in reality it's just a disguise. What they really want to do is just take power and be in control. It's just a way of politicians, when they run out of ideas, they just, go into, well, we just need to take power because we just don't have great ideas. And eventually, people are going to catch up with that. So that's the perfect way, present all this crazy, like you're seeing today, where, a woke culture, everything is racist. It's just a disguise to what really is really going on. And it's these politicians really getting a grip on taking all the power. So we need to just teach for how to love this nation, and then we can go in and teaching what a bad ideology is and show it. Over 100 countries, this ideology has been put in place, and it never worked. So why would it, what would you think is going to work this time? What is going to make it work this time? I don't think it's going to work. I mean, we're already seeing by looking at the states like California and New York, they're perfect. Also, you can go to maybe an Indian reservation and see exactly what socialism is done, because the federal government throws so much money into these areas, and they never really succeed. It's like the worst areas you have in the United States.
Jonathan, I love that was all excellent, but I specifically love your point that we need to start with teaching how to love this nation before we can actually start dismantling the communist ideology, if you will. We're going to want to have you back. We're going to want to go over so many things, because I've got so much on my list that we still have yet to cover, but we're needing to conclude this segment for today. Before moving on, though, you're getting involved in your local government there. And that's been a call that's been on your heart as you've seen the rise of socialism in the United States. I feel like so many people feel completely helpless and unable to take action. So would you mind being able to speak into that a little bit and just share what you're doing in your community and what that looks like and how people can get involved and not be in this hopeless mindset?
Well, everything started with Trump. Trump was the person that, every time we talk about Trump, we always say it was the greatest president. Yeah, it was the greatest president in my lifetime. I think he's done many accomplishments, but I think one of the biggest accomplishments that I saw with Trump, it was awaken a nation to put him to become activists like myself. I think what we need to do and what I'm trying to do is not just to lead the charge by going and throwing my head and start running as you know for city council in my town, Wilmington, North Carolina. But I also want to become that person to awake others to become activists, because I think not leaving everything to one person is the answer. We all need to do our part to engage in our community in the local, state level, and take it all the way to the federal level. We all need to get engaged. The problem that I see with our movement, the conservative movement, that we all part-timers. We all do our little part, and then we all think, well, we have to go to work. I don't want to get involved. In the meantime, the other side is being full-time activists. So that's the reason why you have the media taking over by then. A lot of our political, our politics, our education, think about it. Everything is pretty much owned by the left in a way, but we are the majority. The problem that we have with our movement is that we are not engaged enough, and that's the reason, one of the main reasons that I wanted to get in politics, to use my platform to bring others like myself and as many as possible to become activists, so we can counter the other side with our voice to be heard as equal as they are.
That's amazing. In Wilmington, North Carolina, what is the
Yes.
political climate like right now? And what does your involvement look like? And what did your decision look like in deciding to run for office? And not all of our viewers are going to want to run for office. So what are some of the ways that, they can get involved in those ways?
Of course, not everybody is going to be able to get and do what I'm doing, because it's a lot of sacrifice. They're going to come after you because where you believe. They're going to try to, if you have a business, try to destroy your business, cancel your name. So many bad things are going to happen, attack your family. So I understand that. But you can become a volunteer for the candidate that is supporting you. You can become an advocate to go and talk about this candidate, recruit others to come and support the candidate. So that's a good way to become an activist. You don't have to run for office, but you can go and tell others, let's go and get involved and support this person that is aligned with our ideologies. Make sure that he get in office. Make sure we hold them accountable when that person's not doing what they're supposed to do. That's the best way that I think, because I understand not everybody's going to want to do what I'm doing. Believe me, I didn't want to do this, but I felt a call from God that, I had to do this. And that's the only reason I did it. But that's how I feel everybody can do their part. Think about if we instead of having 20 volunteers, we have 2 million volunteers. How much can we accomplish? Think about for 1 second, how much can we accomplish? Our movements on the conservative side can become very powerful. So that's the way I look at it, to get involved.
That's fantastic. Well, we are going to wrap up this segment. We'll have you back in just a moment. I'm having a couple technical difficulties with timing, so we're going to get that sorted out, and we'll be right back with you all. Thank you so much. Hello, we are back. Jonathan and I actually had a great discussion over the break, so too bad you couldn't be a part of that, but you get to be a part of it now, so we're going to dive in. In the last segment, we talked about Jonathan's growing up in Venezuela, his experience there, and really the focus on changing and shifting institutions, whether it's the educational institution or areas of small business, what have you, in order to shift towards a Marxist agenda, and how he's seeing that mirrored in the United States. And then we also talked about practical actions that he's taking in his community, and the need for hope, and the need for a love of our country, and not just the infighting and backfighting back and forth. But we wanted to shift this segment and specifically talk about the ideology of Marxism itself, not necessarily its structure or its tactics, but the ideology and what that brings to a society. And so, Jonathan, I mentioned these quotes, but I want to read these to you really quickly, and I also want to read these to our viewers and then have a dialogue about it. So the first is from Whitaker, well, it's regarding Whitaker Chambers. It's by Richard A. Reinsich, and he's talking about how Chambers left, communist Russia and espionage in the United States and transitioned into a different civil life when he came to faith in Jesus Christ. And so what Richard remarks concerning Marxism and Whitaker Chambers' transition is that man had too easily concluded that he created his reality through his own mind and consent. In the 20th century, the horrific consequences for the human person, for liberty, and for civilization itself were the pile of dead bodies sacrificed by the terror regimes in pursuit of the liberationist politics that ended in man organizing the world against man. And I know that quote seems really harsh, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that and the ideology that it proposes, as well as the consequence of genocide and how that results in a Marxist regime.
Well, my thoughts on that is like, once again, is with the Marxist ideology is, I believe is the political correctness is the perfect master plan. Distraction, confusion is their weapon. Creating all these things to keep us apart. We united, or we're always going to conquer anything we want. But you got to look at it right now. All the things that you're seeing, it is just complete. It's like you're living in the twilight zone. All these things are perfectly master plans of Marxist ideology. Even I believe probably racism is probably a thing like you have now in this country where they're saying that we live in a systemic racism. And I don't understand what that is, to be honest with you. With the political correctness, it's going so bad that it's even hard for them to explain exactly what their ideologies are standing for. But in reality, and I know, it's all just to keep us divided, so they can keep putting and pushing crazy ideologies that eventually are going to take a good power grip of our rights. And that's all, what I believe in that.
With BLM, I mean, the leaders of BLM have come out. They said that they're trained Marxists. They actually trained in Venezuela under Maduro. So we are seeing that pattern with some of these radical groups that are coming forward that are claiming, social justice issues, but have that training in Marxism. Something that I think is fascinating, because we're talking about division, and there's so much division in the United States right now. I mean, counties are trying to secede from states, parties are trying to split, parties are against parties, so there's obviously a lot of division. When our country was founded, from a Madisonian standpoint, factions were good. Distinct groups of people that created tension around ideologies were good, so that power was diffused or disseminated. That's why they created a Federalist System with all of these checks and balances, both horizontally and vertically. So we're talking about division. How do we navigate this divisive action that is claiming free speech and yet removing free speech? How do we take these two different representations of what I guess difference looks like, and move towards a place where we're unified as a nation, but we're still enabling room for conversation and growth and distinctions? Well,
I believe it starts with education. Once again, without that proper education, this is going to be really hard. So I believe the education, it will be one. Second, activism. Like me running, I'm trying to motivate my community to get engaged, to see exactly what the real problems are. what is this, the problems that are actually taking us apart? What can we do to actually come together? Even with our own party and our movement, we're all going to not agree with everything, and it's beautiful, it's good. We cannot agree with everything, but we have to come into the realization that the things are not as bad as they look. I think the media is playing a big role to creating all these problems that I believe are not there.
Why do you think they're doing that?
It's a tactic. It's just, see, in Venezuela, Chavez didn't get put by the poor. In reality, who put Chavez in power? The very wealthy. They were the ones that came, supporting Chavez's campaign. They were the ones that put in all the money into his campaign because they felt if we put this guy in power, they thought he was an ignorant person. He was going to be somebody easy to control. They were going to have all the power. And in reality, that backfired because Chavez got in power. He understood how much power he had and turned around and all the people that put him in power said, listen, I am in charge. So sorry, but not sorry.
I think a lot of people are going to hate me for drawing this parallel, but it seems too obvious to not draw it, personally. So, I mean, we're looking at the recent 2020 presidential election. And, typically people would say, oh, the Democrat Party, the party that represents the little man, which if you look historically, we know that's not true. But if you look at the 2020 presidential election, we see over $400 million from Mark Zuckerberg coming into the election process and altering the election process in favor of Biden. I mean, this is proven and verified information. So in looking at that, and the man possibly has dementia.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what are those parallels? What's happening? Like, where are we?
But I think, once again, coming from where I saw with Chavez, it's in a way the same story. Now it's being told in English. It was the media in my country. They're very wealthy. They put this guy in power. Who put Joe Biden in power? It was not the people. People tend to forget exactly before COVID-19. This man couldn't put 100 people in a gymnasium. I have probably more people the day I launched my campaign in my place. We could have easily had 300 people the first day I launched for my campaign. Joe Biden could have put 100 people in a gymnasium when he started running. So you're telling me this guy was the most popular president in history? I don't know. I'm going to question that. I'm going to feel really skeptical about that. In the meantime, you have Donald Trump filling stadiums, warehouses, people from all over. How can we, justify that this guy won? That's another conversation there, right? But I think it is, once again, the wealthy trying to put somebody in power that they feel that this person is going to, do their play, do their bidding for these people. That's the reason what I feel they got him in power, because they feel by having this president now, they're free to do whatever they want. They're free to get more corrupted, to get actually more grip on power. I think communism is not going to come directly from the government. It's going to come through corporations, like as you see right now, canceling people that are not agreeing with what they're trying to push. That way you don't feel, okay, it's not the government, it's these companies. But who's giving this power to these companies? It's the government. So they're using this corporation to actually push an agenda. It's this very smart tactic to do it. They're not doing it the way it was done in the past, when the actually government comes straight forward and say, we're going to take this from you. And no. It's the corporations, the ones that canceling, the president, politicians, and then hurting them financially, so they can have to, back up and stop running for office. And then as we're getting all distracted by what corporation legislation is being passed to actually take power away from you on the assumption, we're doing this to not allow these companies to to keep doing what they're doing. So that's the way I look at it.
I want to highlight what you're saying there at the end. And you had mentioned this during the break when we were discussing as well, because in Venezuela, a lot of this came through military force. Things were, enforced upon the people. And then here in the U.S., we have kind of this political correctness pandemic, if you will, and, everything going on with cancel culture. But you really were talking about the role of the corporations. And I think it's so important that we notice and we discuss that Marxism is an ideology. It's about power. It simply says that man doesn't really have value, even though it in an odd way makes him God because of a materialist viewpoint, but it's about power. So this can be infused from an elected official, or it can come from big tech. It's simply who holds the power. And right now we have big tech that's controlling our communication as well as influencing our electoral process through government grants. So we're heading towards the end of the segment here, but you really hit it on the head with that. And I'm just wondering, what are your final thoughts on, you've talked about education, you've talked about political involvement. What are the things that people really need to be aware of as we're kind of getting sideswiped by a crony capitalism that is instilling a more of a Marxist, power-driven type futuristic view of the United States?
Well, in South America and in a lot of countries in South Central America, you always see a chronic capitalism. That's the way, the new modern, way to bring tyranny to you, because they understand that doing it by force with military force, it kind of look back and then, somebody's going to get involved and try to play the good guy. So they understand. These people are getting really smart. They know the best way to do is with some chronic capitalism, like you're seeing right now in the United States. The best way for me to see a way to combat this is, once again, become an activist. Think about, we the people have the power to cancel whoever we want. Facebook, Instagram, any company that is pushing something, we just don't give them our money. That right there, when you start hurting these people financially, it speaks a lot. We tell them, we're in charge by just doing that. So you don't have to run for office, but we have to get together to start, fighting back that way. I believe maybe by hurting them financially will be a good way to counter that. When they start getting hurt financially, believe me, they're going to have to get their stuff together. Second of all, getting people elected in power, they're actually going to work for the people. They're not going to work for, the highest bid. Who gave me more money during my campaign? Well, I'm going to have to play ball with that person. No, I think we need to put people in power. They're going to actually work to do the job.
Jonathan, it is always a joy to speak with you. I love your insights. We are going to have you back on again and again. Thank you so much for your time today. Do you have a final quick word for our viewers?
Well, like I say, education is always going to be an issue for me. Like, the more well-educated we get, the more power we're going to be able to give, our power. We're going to take our country back if we start, look, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, I didn't understand a lot of things when I was 18 years old, right? I knew something was wrong, but I didn't understand how bad it was. It took me to become, more mature to understand that. So it's my job, now that I understand it, and I can put all these things together from the past and the present, to prevent people to allow these things to happen in the future. So it's always going to be education, educating and activism.
Thank you, Jonathan. Talk to you again here soon.
Thank you.
Great conversation with Jonathan Uzcategui. Can't wait to have him back. We covered everything from socialism's effect on education to how to get involved in local governance to how socialism and communism is really rooted in an ideology that is anti the church and anti-freedom of individual persons. So we'll be covering that in more depth as we continue, but we've got to head to a commercial break. Do not leave, because I have a few things that I really want to go over with you, including the most amazing book of all time. The most amazing book of all time. Thank you, Dr. Don, for giving me this book. I am forever indebted, and I want to share it with all of you. So don't go away. Come right back, and we will be covering that in 4 minutes after this commercial break. Thank you. Welcome back. Glad you stayed. These books. So, we're going to dive into socialism, communism, all the isms, because I was a philosophy major. Nerd status. So, first, Freedom and Federalism. If you haven't read it, I know it looks ancient, but it's not. It's brilliant. This was given to me by my favorite government professor of all time. Sorry, everybody else, but everyone knows Dr. Don was the best. So, Freedom and Federalism breaks down our government structure. Sounds boring, right? No, it's not boring, because we are not a democracy. We're not. We are a constitutional republic, and that's actually extremely significant, specifically in the political climate right now, because the push from socialism, or the push for socialism and the push for communism ultimately is coming through this guise of creating democratic representation. So I want to define these terms and dive into that just briefly and why that is significant. And we have 7 minutes to do it. So let's go. Democracy, pure democracy, is one vote for every single person in majority rules. So the majority could vote to take away your gun rights, or the majority could vote to silence you because they think you're annoying at a party and they don't want you to say anything anymore. The majority could vote, and it would create oppression for the minority. The founders were extremely aware of this, and they took extreme precautions to protect against it. And I don't have time to go into all of those right now, but the biggest example that I've already more or less touched on is the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights is one of the most anti-democratic documents in human history, because what it says is that you and I as individual persons have value in and of ourselves that is not derived from government. And because of that, we have rights. We have the ability to make certain choices and operate in various forms of society, and the government can't dictate that. In fact, our government is mandated to protect it. And so because of that, the United States has the rule of law. And the rule of law says whether you are a big tech oligarch, I'm using oligarch sarcastically, whether you're Mark Zuckerberg or whether you're Jack Dorsey or whether you're Donald Trump, you have to follow the law of the United States of America, because it is grounded in the first and foremost principle that all persons are created equal, and with that they are endowed with certain inalienable rights. And among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's Declaration of Independence, not Bill of Rights, but founding documents together protect those truths. So with that, this book explains how that ideology, that belief system, is constructed together in a system of government, how executive branch has veto power, how we have an independent Supreme Court and judicial system. Britain doesn't have that. Don't know if you knew that. So we have a Supreme Court. We have the Senate, which has equal representation for all the different states, even though the lower house, Congress, is more balanced based on population. So we have these different distinct elements that create these checks within itself, but also we don't just have a centralized government or national government, we also have state governance. And these working together create what is called a Federalist System. And it is a constitutional republic. It is representative in order to protect the individual, whereas democracy is about the majority. So what we have happening right now, boom, the witness. I have a confession. I actually have not read this book yet. So if you're interested in a book club, mark it, shout it out, thinking about doing it. I want to go through this book. I'm super excited. Whittaker Chambers was a part of espionage in the United States, working with Soviet Russia. And one of the things that he talks about is how communism comes in with an ideology that is so materialistic in nature that it removes that value of the individual person and becomes so pragmatic that it is all about gaining control and gaining power. And so what we see right now is we see a push for democratic government. People saying we want to be represented. We want every person to be represented. But those that are pushing for that democratic or democratized government are really pushing for power. And we're seeing this consistently in the news trends. We're seeing this consistently with various organizations. And I'm going to drop one without being able to talk about it, and that's a dangerous thing to do, but BLM. So BLM, trained Marxist organization. I am totally pro-race, pro-people, pro-yay. Like, yes, celebrate, love America. But BLM is pushing a Marxist agenda. So we're going to talk about some of the implications of that on our future shows. But I just wanted to be able to talk briefly about how we are not a democracy and how the term democracy is being used as a reason, a false reason, to be able to promote socialist agenda. So for example, with social media fact checkers. They're saying we're protecting against hate speech, or we are, protecting this demographic here. Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, if we don't protect our rights, that group of people is not going to be protected. And I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place, so I'm going to try and wrap this up here really quickly. This is my first live show. Love y'all. Glad you're here. But this is dangerous. It's dangerous when we start swapping terms, and it's dangerous when we start removing the value of truth in our society. And what I mean by that is with cancel culture and, all the buzzwords, it's such a pain to use buzzwords because you feel really trite. But with cancel culture and with identity politics and all of these things, we oversimplify, right? It's the danger of isms. So communism absolutizes that viewpoint. Socialism absolutizes, that viewpoint. Feminism, any ism makes that one thing the basis upon which all other viewpoints flow for that particular philosophy. And what we're doing right now is we're creating a lot of isms, and we're removing our capacity to have dialogue around what is true and what is valuable. And so our terms are changing. And because of that, we're losing our form of governance that has been able to protect our individual freedoms in a really beautiful way. So we don't have time to dive into the fullness of that today, but it was so amazing having Jonathan on, having his viewpoints as he immigrated from Venezuela. And we're going to go into this more because this is really deep on my heart, and it's a big deal. So it's affecting a lot of Americans in every way, shape, and form. So I've got 1 minute to tell you to read the frickin' book. It's a good book. I haven't read it. It's terrible. I'm telling you to read it. I'm going to read it. And also, we will see you next week. Same time, same place, Main Street. And we're going to be talking about division in America in all its various forms, and diving into that a little bit, and how do we feel about that. So that'll also touch on some of the same topics as today. And last but not least, follow on social media. I am honestly terrible about social media. My team gets on me about this all the time. But I'm going to be there, and I'm working on it. So we have some new content coming out for you. My husband interviewing me on why I am involved in politics and what the heck we're doing here. So get the nitty-gritty there, and I will see you next week. Thank you all very much. So excited to be here. Cheers, and enjoy your lunch.